Hey, it's Rebecca, and you are listening to Resilient by Design. Today's episode is about money. I don't know why I love saying it that way. Wasn't it like, it was Donald Trump's TV show? Oh my gosh, what the heck was it called? You know, the one. You're fired. That one. Oh gosh. The Apprentice. That use that as their like opening song. I know it was an existing song, but I just can't stop. Every time I hear that word money, I think of the song and then I think of Donald Trump. Don't ask. Okay, let's dive in to money. Today, I want to talk about profitability, specifically what matters when you want to be profitable right now in a recession. We're talking about profitability. We are talking about getting money that you can keep. That's a profit, not money that you get and then you have to use to pay for things. Anyhow, I'm going to clarify what I mean in this episode. So get your pens and papers out. This is a good one.
All right. I'm Rebecca Hay, and I've built a successful interior design business by trial and error, podcasts, online courses, and so many freaking books. Over the last decade, I've grown from an insecure student to having false starts to careers, and now I'm finally in the place where I want to be. Throughout my journey, it's been pretty obvious that I'm passionate about business and helping other entrepreneurs do the same. Each week, I'll share tangible takeaways from my own experience and the experiences of other badass women to help you build your confidence and change your business.
We're talking about money today. We're talking about profitability and specifically what you need to know to be profitable in a recession, aka 2023. So here we go. Before I dive in, I just want to let you know that this is not the first time I've talked about profitability. We had a whole episode about project profitability earlier in the season, at the end of season 3. And that episode was episode number 96. And that was an interview with my very own operations manager, Marilee Wright, who used to be a client and then came back to help me with my business. And we walked through some like really nitty gritty numbers. So if you're kind of curious about what does it mean for a project to be profitable and you want to understand a little bit more about, I've got the papers in front of me. There was a freebie with that episode, which I printed here. So just go to RebeccaHay.com/96 if you really want something to walk you through how to calculate gross profit in your business. It's a little bit of an accounting 101. It's sort of the basics when you're running a business to understand terminology and how you can figure out if your each project is profitable. So she taught me a lot about, years ago, Marilee, when I first started my business, after I'd worked for her, so I guess I hadn't just started. I think it was I was 2 years into my business, I think. She, and I would do like an exchange. Like at that point, she just needed like a Roman for her kitchen and the reno was done. And so in exchange for me helping her with some of those little odds and sods after the fact, she would help me with business development. And she taught me so many things. Like I did not know what cogs were. Don't worry if you're like, what the hell is a cog? Like a cog in a wheel? Yeah, that's what I thought. Or like clog. I'm like, oh, aren't those like shoes? Turns out cogs, COGS, cost of goods sold, is just what you pay your vendors for the products. But you can listen to that episode 96, if you want to dig dive deep into all things numbers. Today, I want to just really simplify things for you. And I just feel like this might be the wake-up call that you need or the reminder, because I felt like I've needed that reminder and I think I might share that here. I haven't shared with anyone. I don't know why. It's so funny. Like I don't share anything. And then I go onto a public podcast and I like bare my soul. What is that about? Anyways, I had an exercise that I do at the end of every year. As you know, I do my year-end review and we review the numbers. And we came to a very astonishing realization that I'm going to share a little bit later in this podcast that was a little disheartening financially, to tell you the truth. And so for me, it was the beginning of a big realization of a simple concept. This is the secret. If you want to make more money, you need to do two things and two things only. You need to increase your sales and you need to decrease your expenses. That's it. Literally, that's it. And companies that are in a growth mode, like a startup, or you are trying to take your company or your business to the next level, might have increased expenses for a period of time until they get to that place where the sales then catch up. That I get. But we're talking about being in a slow economic time. We're talking about recession. We're talking about what do you do to be profitable so at the end of the day, you still have money left over in the bank. And I'm going to say something that may sound controversial to you. After you pay yourself. I'm like holding this microphone. I feel like I'm on stage. Pay yourself first, because I never used to do that. No, but seriously, a profit means there's money in the bank after you've paid yourself and everything else. So if we're going based on that principle that you only need to increase your sales and decrease your expenses, it sounds pretty easy, right? There's lots of things you can do to increase sales. Lots of things you can do to decrease your expenses. The expenses part is the part that if you're not careful, can start to creep up. And that's happened to me over the years where, maybe I kept on a freelancer doing tasks that really weren't billable, or maybe I hired salaried employees that really I didn't have the work or the cash flow for, but it was comfortable for me to have them there every day doing the job, knowing that I didn't have to do it. Maybe I've invested a lot of money in marketing at a time when maybe I didn't need to be spending that. Like there's so many times in the history of my little business that I know that I have maybe paid for a few more programs than I really needed, wasn't really paying attention to. Can we consolidate? Do we really need to have so many logins of this one particular program and that type of thing? So it's very easy, if you're not looking at your expenses, for them to climb up. And it's one thing if your expenses climb up proportionate to your revenue, your sales, your income. But if they're climbing up, I don't know why I'm like leaning into the mic. I'm like, if they're climbing up, clobber them down. No, that's not what I'm saying. But if they start to climb up, if you're not paying attention, it's really sad because then it can negatively affect you without you really realizing, wait a second, why don't I have more money in the bank? What's going on? So, I know it's not sexy to talk about, but one of the first things you need to do is just be aware of your numbers, which is why I did record that 3-part series last year with Mara Lee. Please go back and listen to it if you haven't already. It's called Know Your Numbers. And it's the least sexy part, in my opinion, of running a business. Part 1 is episode 96. So from there, you can find part 2 and part 3. But if you're not looking at your finances on a regular basis, it's going to be very hard to keep your finger on the pulse of those expenses. So something that I've started doing just at the tail end of last year, and now my goal is to do it every single month this year, is every single month I'm updating my forecast. I'm updating the actual numbers in my business so I can see what are my expenses at for this month, what was the revenue that came in, and is it matching what I thought we would do? Because you can start to see trends. If there's a discrepancy in every month, things are out of whack to what you thought, then you need to really pay more attention to the sales. So expenses and sales. Part of your expenses, and a big part, and if you employ people in any capacity, on contract, employees, salaried employees, freelancers, yourself, it is the biggest expense in your business. In a service-based business, and I can't speak entirely to a product-based business, though I imagine you still need a lot of people, your people is your greatest expense. And this is something that I learned way before I even went to design school when I worked. I know I talk about it all the time. I feel like Earl's should sponsor the podcast because I do talk about that restaurant. And feel free, Earl's restaurants, if you're listening, feel free to sponsor me just with food. That would work too. You could like feed me every day, like one of your really great salads. But I worked at Earl's restaurants when I was in Vancouver before and then during the time I was in design school. I worked my way up to be a manager. And as a day leader, they called it at the time. I don't know if they still call it that, or manager. I was privy to the numbers and the costs associated with running the restaurant. And that was my very first experience with labor costs and how much people cost and how that's why you're always, as a restaurant, it's so hard. I wouldn't wish running a restaurant on anyone, but you've got to know, like, when do you cut your servers? Okay, you can go home. What if you get a rush? Then you don't have enough staff. You know, when you go to a restaurant, you're like, oh, they didn't bring enough people. Well, maybe the restaurant got busy and they don't want to pay someone for any more hours than they have people to serve because the margins are razor thin in a restaurant. So all that to say that in a service-based business, in an interior design business, you need a lot of people to service, especially as you start to elevate and you want to go to another level and you want to have a higher level of service. You need to have the people to support you, whether you need administrative help or a junior designer, or you're outsourcing your CAD, or you're bringing on someone to help part-time with social media, or whatever it is. So your people are your greatest expense. And so that is the one you need to keep an eye on. And the only way you can do that is if you're working in your business, working on your business, and regularly looking at the hours. And this is something that I've talked about here on the podcast before. I truly was not great at tracking my hours. I was terrible. Who am I kidding? I'm still terrible. Now I have other people track my hours. I learned that from one of our podcast guests last year, from Katie Raffetto. Thank you, Katie. I now have my team record my hours because I was not doing it. But it is something that you have to be on top of, because otherwise the hours you and your team put in will far exceed the money that is coming in. And regardless of markups and margins on product, you still need to be super tight with the time that the people put in. The rest of your expenses are really a lot easier to control. I think software as a service. Okay, so maybe you don't need that subscription, or maybe you don't need to go out for dinner, or maybe you don't need a photo shoot. Like, there's things that you can cut back on. Maybe rent, maybe you work from home, you don't have rent. Like, maybe your overhead is really low. That's amazing. But the people is needed, but you have to be very careful with the hours they're putting in. The other thing too, in an interior design business like mine, is that it's so boom and bust in the sense of you'll get big projects and get really busy, and then things will slow down. You'll get an infusion of cash that will float you for a few months, and then it slows down. And if you're like me, charging fixed fee, you do get large lump sums of cash, but then there's a couple months where no cash is coming in because you're just working against the money that you brought in. And so there can be this kind of highs and lows and ups and downs. And I know from talking to my own designer friends here in the city, when those times are slower, there's always that moment of panic, like, oh my gosh, am I going to have work? I don't know. Should I lay people off? Do I even need this freelancer? But then what if I get another big project? Well, I don't want to have to train somebody again. I guess I'll just keep them on. And this was like the thought process I've gone through over and over again. And so it can be a little bit stressful. So what's the story of my realization? So at the end of the year, we look at projects. And I talked a little bit about this actually on my episode with Adrian Ramsey, because he talked about recession. Yeah, we talked a little bit about this. I didn't actually say the story. So as you guys know, I do an end of year review. And what we do is we look at all of our projects and we look at the project profitability. So we look at all of the hours that our team put into a project in a given phase, and at our retail hourly rates that are outlined in our contract. So if we were to charge hourly, this is what we would charge. Or if there's any work, if there's any out of scope work for a project, then we bill at those rates, but we're not billing hourly. So it's a benchmark. So we pull all the hours, we put them on a whiteboard for one project at a time. And then we look at, okay, so we put in 300 hours for phase one for design. I'm making that number up. If we put in 300 hours at our hourly rate, it would be this much money. Okay, so let's just make this up. I'm going to be try and keep it super simple and clean. So say it's $100 an hour. If we put in 300, actually, I need a calculator, guys. Guys, I've always said math's not my strong suit. If it was 300 hours times $100 an hour, is that $30,000? I think that's $30,000. Okay, so let's just assume that everybody's at the same rate, and the total hours of the team for the design was 300 hours, and and if we were to charge hourly, it would be $30,000, right? Okay, well, let's look at what we actually charged that client as a fixed fee for that project. Okay. We charged $18,000. Oh my. Looks like we weren't super profitable from a people standpoint, because that means the client's paying us $50 an hour. So we could have made more money if we had charged hourly. It's just a really great way to compare. Now, the trick is to do that when you're quoting a project, not after the fact. But sometimes it's not till after the fact that you start to look at it, and then you can use that data for next time. What happened to us is we went through all our projects over the year. Some of them started, it's like the project. We don't just do calendar year. We're like, okay, when did this project start? This is mainly a 2022 project. Okay, it started in 2021. Fine. And we looked at the normal projects, not the little one-offs or the community builder projects or things that aren't following our regular process, which there's not many of them, because as you know, I say follow your process. And we broke it down by phase. So phase one, how many hours went into it? And what did we charge the client? And then phase two, implementation, how many hours went into that phase? And what did we collect from the client for fees for that phase? Well, let me tell you, all this time, I was feeling frustrated with everything, all the delays. I was thinking, my God, we got to get this project wrapped up. Deficiencies are taking forever. We're never going to make money. We're losing money. I would say all the time, well, there goes our profitability on this project, because implementation's taken 5 months longer than we thought, or we still can't get that side table and we're just spending hours, administrative hours, following up. I definitely thought that we should switch to charging hourly for implementation, because I figured we were losing money. Well, joke's on Rebecca. When we did this analysis with our team in December on the whiteboard, we noticed, in fact, we were making money in implementation despite all the extra hours, because we were making a percentage of the total budget. We actually were covering our costs and making money. What I didn't anticipate was that phase two, or the design phase, we were losing money. And we were losing money. Now, we didn't lose money, let's be clear, but we left money on the table. We found an average across all our projects that went through 2022. The design phase, we undercharged by about 50%. We could have doubled our money if we were billing hourly. And now there's a lot of reasons for that. We had some changeover of staff, and so there's always a little bit of overlap. Also, I think part of it was a lot of pandemic-related delays. And so there were a lot of let's source this. Oh, we can't get that. Let's resource that. So there's a lot of time spent doing that. And honestly, I was flabbergasted. I really thought that we were super profitable. Even going into that meeting, I was like, so cocky. I was like, yeah, obviously we're going to have to start charging hourly for implementation because we can control our time in the design phase, right? That's what I always say. I can control our hours. But if you're not tracking your hours diligently, how are you controlling anything? If you're just working, hoping that all the hours will come in and add up to less than what you charge the client, that is not a strategy, Rebecca. That is hope. Hope is not a strategy. We know this. It was freaking eye-opening. And I'm telling you this because I want you to learn from my mistakes. And I want you to see that also you're going to make mistakes. I make mistakes. I got kind of cocky thinking we totally nailed our design process. And wow, implementation was a struggle because we can't control outside trades and yada, yada, yada. And now guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to test a project and just bill hourly and see how it goes. However, I still prefer to bill fixed. Fixed fee for me is the way to go. You guys can find out more about that. I don't know if it'll be out yet when this episode airs. I should be more organized than that, but we're launching a pricing course and we're going to walk you through all of these things in detail. Pros and cons of fixed versus hourly. I'm going to share my experiences, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and help you decide which pricing model is for you. But until you get that course, all I can tell you is there is no perfect formula. You need to look at and diligently track your time and hours before you can accurately understand which pricing model is for you. Because at first, I can tell you, when I switched to fixed fee, yes, I made more money, hands down, because I wasn't billing for every hour. I was discounting my time. I just wasn't billing. And so as soon as I went from collecting, I don't know, maybe at most I collected $7,500 from start to finish in design fees back in 2017 to 2018, 2019, all of a sudden I'm collecting $18,000, $20,000 for design fees. That's not even from start to finish because I switched to a flat fee. So yes, I was making more money, but now I want to really be clear about the time we're putting into projects. I want to make sure we're getting paid for it and getting paid well for it. So now we're really tracking our hours. And thankfully, my administrator has been really good at tracking all of those hours every single week. And every week we look at the hours and we see. Now, we were doing that in 2022 and we saw what the hours came out to. But it wasn't until the end of the year when I looked at, okay, if we had charged hourly based on these 400 hours at the 150 rate or 225, or you can break it up, like, whatever you want to do. If you've got different people on your team that have different rates, I usually just pick one rate. I'm like, okay, at $190, which is my senior designer rate, knowing that some are higher, some are lower, let's just get an average. And I was shocked. So that is my story. All that to say, you need to track your time against the money you're collecting. And if you are billing hourly and you're like, oh, I don't have to worry about that, I bill hourly. Are you billing for every single freaking hour? Like, do you know what constitutes a billable hour? Pretty much everything you do is a billable hour. Okay. So how to be profitable. Expenses. So that is me talking about get on top of your expenses. Where can you tighten? There's one area that I don't recommend you eliminate as an expense in a down economy, and that is marketing. I think that's the first place people want to cut, but I think that is actually one of the areas you can reduce, but I do think you need to invest in because those are the companies that come out of a recession in a very different standing than the people who just totally retracted and were like, I'm just going to try and play really, really safe. But tightening your expenses and then increasing your sales. And, my husband, Chris, he has his own marketing agency. He always says, and it used to infuriate me. I get so irritated because I was always like, process, let's improve how we do things. He's like, you need more sales. Like you need to generate more revenue. You need more sales. And I was like, yeah, but if I just tighten this here and I just tweak this thing there. And he's like, sales cures all. Sales cures all. If you can bring in cash, bring in cash, then the rest of it is kind of a moot point. So you need to invest in sales. And that's why I say don't cut back on all your marketing expenses, because sometimes you're going to need that to help you grow. Whether it's a Facebook ad, it's a lawn sign, it's getting a publicist to get you featured in a magazine, whatever it is, increasing your rates. Increasing your rates is one of the easiest ways to immediately make more money. And if you guys haven't downloaded that freebie yet, that I introduced a new free download, which is just like really, I think it's 4 or 5 quick and easy ways to immediately bring in more revenue in your design business. It's at RebeccaHay.com/revenue. Download that freebie, check it out. And I walk you through examples of each idea as if you're like, that's really great, but I don't know where my next project's coming from. I get it. So what ways can you bring in revenue right now with the clients that you do have? Because you are going to need to increase your revenue and decrease your expenses. And you may not be doing that by bringing in more projects and more projects. So how can you get creative and bring in more money with the clients that you do have, or the projects or the leads that you've had that haven't quite converted? Like, let's start with the hot leads, then we'll go to the warm leads, and then go to the cold leads. Because your cold lead is someone who doesn't even know you exist. To convert them into being your client is going to take a lot longer than to convert someone who's already like hot and bothered by you and wants what you have to give. So lower your expenses, increase your sales, Pay attention to how you're marketing, how you're positioning yourself. Pay attention to your referrals, your past clients. Who can you reach out to? How can you get crafty? Do you hire someone to help with sales? That's not for everyone, but at a certain size of company, it can be worth it. You can hire someone on a commission basis. If you feel like sales are kind of like a sleazy thing, then maybe just get someone else to do it for you. Every other industry has salespeople. How many people do you know that are salespeople? My friend works for NFL. He used to work for Tennis Canada. He's sales. He manages the big accounts. My brother used to be in sales for UPS. He now works for a different company. Like, that's a big part of what some people's livelihood depends on, is bringing in sales and sometimes on commission. I worked with a business coach back in 2019, and she was awesome. And some of you might remember her, Ariella. And not Ariella. That's one of our designers remembers. Ariel was the coach. And she said to me, she's like, you should consider hiring someone for sales. And I was like, what are you talking about? I don't have the money for that. But she saw something that I didn't see. I was so busy in my business. And as much as I was pretty good at like being the person working on my business, she saw that I was too consumed with HR, the hiring, the managing the people. At that time, I had like a team of 7. It was so exhausting. I was like school teacher a little bit, trying to make sure people aren't infighting. And this person didn't do what they said they were going to do. And I was like, oh my God, can't we all just be adults and do our job? I was busy doing that. I was busy fine tuning our processes. I was really focused on like marketing and creating content for Instagram. I had a YouTube channel. Like, I was busy. And I'll admit it, I can do sales pretty well, but it took me stepping out of my comfort zone. Like, I wasn't someone who was going to cold call builders. It was always on my to-do list. And I was like, well, I'll do that next week. I'll do it next week, because I felt uncomfortable. And so she was onto something about hiring someone to help with sales. I didn't do it. And then the pandemic happened. So we all kind of got frozen in our state of being. But I look back at that time and think, I wonder what would have been different if I had done that, if I'd hired someone who could outsource some of the sales, or at least start those conversations to bring people into my world. Because, and this is something I've been saying for a long time that you may have heard me say before, is it doesn't matter how good you are if nobody knows you exist. It doesn't matter how good you are if nobody knows you exist, because there's so many talented people out there. But the ones that you are seeing succeed and grow and scale aren't always the most talented ones. Sometimes Sometimes they're just the really clever business ones that, yep, they've got a pretty good sense of style and maybe they hire really qualified people. But there's something to be said for getting in front of more people or the right people or your past clients or spending the time to create a newsletter, whatever it is you need to do to bring in more sales. You need to be paying attention to sales. You are a business owner. And this is something that, I learned early. If I spent all my time in my business, picking fabrics, doing floor plans, I used to do all my own AutoCAD. I loved AutoCAD. I was really good at it, actually. I was top of my class. No big deal. Doing the AutoCAD, space planning, meeting the clients on site, walking through, meeting the contractors, picking the paint colors, designing custom furniture, like you name it, all the things, shopping for lighting, rugs, all those things. If I spent all my time doing that, and I did go through phases in my business early on where I spent so much time doing the creative because I loved it, but then I would look up and be like, oh shoot, where's the next project coming from? So I would love to just leave you with that. You can make more money. You can be profitable, even in a recession. But you need to step up and put on your business owner hat. You need to look from the outside in. You need to look at the stats, the metrics. What are your expenses? Can you reduce them? Can you set a goal? We went through our software as a service got out of control last year because obviously I've got a podcast, I have online courses and a design business. So we're using a lot of different programs. I literally had my team type everything out because we spent software as a service in 2022. I can't believe I'm sharing this. As a company, we spent, what was it? It was either $19,000 or $22,000. I think it was $19,000. I was like, what? How does this happen? Who let this happen? Me. Because I wasn't paying attention. I'm like, yeah, no, that seems like a really good thing. Let's do that calendar thing where people can sync their calendars. Yeah, let's do that. Okay, let's use Hello Audio to do a private podcast in addition to Libsyn without even looking in to see if the original Libsyn platform could do a private podcast, which turns out it can. So we put everything out onto paper and we looked at, okay, do we need to renew that subscription? No. Are we using that anymore? No. Do we need 3 logins for Design Docs anymore? No. We can reduce that. Do we need this? Let's go back to the free plan. Do we need, right now, do we need to be paying for AutoCAD? Because it's all subscription based now, right? I'm like, no, we don't need to pay for it right now. We don't have any projects that are in the design phase. Great, gone. We'll bring it back as needed or just for that one user, not for the whole organization. So you need to get crystal clear on where your money's going. And then you need to step up and be the salesperson for your business and bring in the money, whether you charge more for your rates or whether you raise your rates and charge more for your services, like we talked about in the episode with Abigail and Emily of the Boss Project, or you need to leverage your social media, reach out to a publicist, start a newsletter, start networking, get some lawn signs out there. I don't know what you need to do, but you need to push sales. Do you need to join an organization so you can go to events and be in front of other entrepreneurs, or maybe you want lawyer clients? Where do you need to be to get in front of the right people to either bring in new clients or to increase the money you can make from your existing clients? Because you provide so much value, there are lots of ways that you could service your existing clients to bring in more money. Okay. Hopefully I've left you with some ideas just to get the wheels turning. Hopefully there's some nuggets. Hopefully it's not too much of a cautionary tale. As you know, that's the whole point of this podcast. The whole point of this podcast was for me to share what I have learned in the years in business. I've been running my own business now for 9 years and I'm still learning, clearly. But hopefully my openness and my candid conversations with you on this podcast help you to better your business. And if that's the case, just leave a review. 5 stars is all I've asked for. Just be like, I love you. Or I've learned a lot. Or thanks for the podcast. You don't have to write an essay. It would just mean a lot to me so that we can get more eyeballs on the podcast so that I can go after one of my goals this year, which is to bring in revenue from the podcast, because I think it's a really valuable resource. I want to keep doing it. I love it so much. I think we provide tons of value. Why not bring in a few key sponsors that I align with that could pay me some money, because it'd be really helpful. So if you guys could help me by reviewing my podcast or even sending any vendors my way that you think are a right fit to sponsor the podcast, let me know. But otherwise, you got this. You got this. This is a weird year, but we're in it together. And if you're not already inside our Designer Meetup Facebook group, please come join us there. It's a great place where we can support you throughout your business journey. All right. I'll see you guys soon.